So before you start to hand stitch and pin, you might find it easy to mark out your stitch positions. So I find it easy to sort of mark my stitch positions, and I want to maybe make a stitch 1/2 centimetre in and 1 centimetre along. So I can just come round now and using a ruler, and you could use the end of a tape measure. I've got this ruler that I use. You want to sort of just make a little fabric dot. You could use a chalk pen if you want one of those, and you're just making your positions. This will make sure that your stitching is nice and even. You don't have to do this. It depends if you know how much hand stitching you normally do. You know, if you're very good with hand stitching, then you might just instinctively be able to get a nice even stitch. But I think that just adding in a little bit of a guide helps. And then I can do the same around the bottom here as well. So 1/2 centimetre in, 1 centimetre along. So start off in the corner there, then 1 centimetre along. When you get to your tape here, it's good just to say that you're going to do 1 stitch either side. It looks neater. It's about 11 millimetres wide, that tape, so it's about right, but it's quite good if you can just, when you get to that point, just put a stitch mark either side. So I've got my sole here. We're now going to pin our toe and heel to our sole. Now just looking at the sole there, you can see that this is the inside and this is the outside, and we know from our pattern that we've got the gap that we left is on the inside, so we know that this toe matches up to this upper, and then on the other one will go for the other side, so the gaps are both on the inside. The pattern is not 100% symmetrical, so I'll start off by just putting a pin in the toe there, and then I'll work my way round, and I won't put a pin in every single dot, probably do every other one, just to pin the toes in. And the fabric will curve up and around. I'll just leave it there. I'll leave that bit open for now, and I'll come round and do the other side. So there's a little bit of easing in, you know, because obviously you want your toe to be 3-dimensional. Want to give yourself some space. So I put my hand in here. That kind of brings the fabric up a bit. They look kind of crazy right now, quite punky with all of those pins in. And then you want to do the same with the heel. So leave this bits open because this is going to tuck in here. So the centre back is where that tape is. So just find your centre back. Just do it by eye, and then when you do the second shoe, just make sure you do the same on both. So you can sort of line them up against each other. And then we're going to bring that heel round, so this sort of curves around here. Once again, to make that 3-dimensional shape. And then at this area here, these two are going to overlap. So I'll put a pin in there. And then we want these two to overlap. So we'll put the heel part underneath the toe part, and then I'm pinning through all layers there, and then same on the other side. So draw that round, there we go. So you've got that now all pinned in place. You want to do the same on both shoes, and then you just want to check that the centre backs are in the same place. so match them up together. But really it is kind of a bit of doing it by eye, but having those dots that we've marked out does help. So you want to do it on both of them. Once you've done that, then we're going to get our needle and thread and do some hand sewing. Just something I thought of actually whilst doing that, if you wanted to, you could always flip this round and have your navy blue fabric on the outside and have your sunflower fabric on the inside. That would look equally lovely. Or you could even do it flipped round, so you could have navy blue on the back, sunflowers on the front. So, you know, you could have it, if I show you on this one. So if you are using this fabric, or whichever of the fabrics you're using, you know, you could almost flip that round and have the kind of blue showing there and the toe in there, so you've got kind of a colour blocked effect. So you can have lots of fun making these. So next thing you want to do is just to pin, or draw your dots around here and then pin that in place. Once everything's pinned, then we shall get on with our hand sewing. So we're now going to do some hand sewing. We pinned the shoes to their soles, so we're going to now sew the espadrilles together. So take about a 1 metre length, like a full arm's span of your espadrille thread. You're going to thread that through the sharper of your 2 yarn needles. So the one on the left hand side is the slightly sharper one, and thread your espadrille yarn into the eye of your needle. Nice big, if only all needles were so easy to thread as that one. Okay, and then we want to do a knot at the end of our espadrille thread. I'll make it a double. Make mine a double. Here we go. Trim off the tail. You can start somewhere that's sort of comfortable for you to start. So I'm right-handed, so I'm kind of going to do it this way and go around anti-clockwise. If you're left-handed, you might want to do it the opposite way. Just find a way that's comfortable. I'll take off a couple of those pins actually just for now. Oops. So I can get in here. And then I want to just dig my needle in, coming out about halfway on the sole. Pull that thread through and then tuck your knot in there, because you don't want to be having to tread on your knot. That would be uncomfortable. So just wiggle it in there and then squash that back together. Okay. So now what we're going to do is a blanket stitch coming all the way around. Let me just move this camera angle up a little bit. So I hope this is clear for you to see. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take our thread and we want to post it in about halfway through the espadrille sole, so that we're coming back up through one of our pen marks like that. Now if you find the needle hard, you can use your needle grabber, and then just that will help you to pull the needle up. Once you get going, it gets easier. You get into a sort of a rhythm with it. This first bit here where you're sewing through both layers as well and you've got the seam allowances is quite difficult, and then it gets a bit easier. Then what we want to do, so with the blanket stitch, take your thread and hold it down with your thumb over that side there so it's out of your way. And then you want to come through, so you're going to come in halfway along the sole, and then you want to come up through this layer here, the heel piece of fabric, and then you want to come through the toe piece of fabric as well. This is the trickier one because you're coming up through all these layers. There we go. This is where the needle grabber does come in handy. It's quite a fat needle as well. And then pull that thread. So that makes your first blanket stitch. Can you see how it's almost like a corner there? Then you want to hold this way and do the same again. So in through the sole and then up through all those layers of fabric, coming up through the pen mark that you've drawn. and then do the same again. So hold that there, and this is where it gets a bit easier now because you've only got one layer to go through, so it's much easier. Pull that through. Can you see how that stitch is now forming? And then hold that back. Take the pins out as you go through there. Can put a good podcast on or a radio, watch reruns of the Sewing Bee. There we go. So you're just going to carry on. Whoop. If you've got my butterfly pins probably aren't the best ones for this because the thread can get caught up on the butterflies. If you've got plain pins, that might be better. So each time that you come round, you just want to give it a good tug to make sure that that stitch is sitting flat. And like I say, you can use your needle gripper if you want, if you're finding it difficult. But you can see there, so that so the thread is coming up in the loop. When you pull it and you pull it that way, that's what's creating that design. So you want to make sure that your needle's coming up this side of the thread, not this side. And you want to make sure that you're keeping your thread taut under your thumb there. Actually, when you get into it, it's quite relaxing and therapeutic. Okay, so I shall carry on and I shall join you to show you how to finish these off. So I'm now coming round to the area where the opening is. So what you'll find is that you'll be simultaneously sewing the opening of your fabric together whilst sewing your upper to your shoe. I'm on to my second espadrille now, and I'm just coming to this area here, and actually I can see I haven't got enough thread to last me the remainder of getting around my shoe. You're probably going to need to cut 2 lengths of thread to get round your whole shoe, because if you did it all in one length, the thread would have to be so long that it would actually be quite tricky to manage. So you are at some point probably going to have to do a join. So I wanted to next up sort of show you how I do a nice smooth join for you. So you'll see that I've actually got quite a long remaining piece of thread here, but the reason why I'm going to change thread early is I want to avoid this area where the 2 cross over. So when you're sewing, you're going to get to this point here, and you're going to have to sort of cross over and go through 2 layers of fabric, and I don't want to be kind of doing my join in my thread and having to contend with that crossover at the same time. So that's why I'm kind of, even though I've got a bit more thread left, I'm going to tackle the join a little early so that then I'm onto my new strand of thread before I get sort of to this crossover bit here. So there's my stitch that I've just done, and I'm going to go as if I'm doing exactly the same again, but I'm going to come up and I'm not going to sort of go back in again. I'm just going to come up here like this, and I want to leave enough thread here that I'll be able to kind of pick it up. So I'm leaving a bit of a loop of thread here, and then I want to just make a bit of a knot. So I've come up here, whoops, and then I can knot my thread This is easier to do in this area than it is in the heel area as well. So just try and knot your thread as close to your sole as you can. And do a double knot. And then you want to peel back your espadrille sole, kind of open it up in between those layers of jute. Push your needle back down, any old how, into the sole there. And then just pull that tight and nestle that knot in there. So you don't want to be treading on that knot, so I've just buried it in there. And then my espadrille thread is just coming out here. I'll just trim that so that can't be seen. So I've tied a knot here, which is nestled in there, and then I've got this loop here that's ready to be picked up by my next stitch. So thread up your needle with your new piece of espadrille thread, espadrille yarn. Oops. And then we'll tie a knot in the end of that. You do try to keep your threads as long as you can so that you, you know, you're not having to change over too often. But it's just if you did, check I haven't cut that too short yet. If you did kind of do a long enough thread that you could get all the way around, then you might find that actually it's, you know, it's a bit too much. Okay, so there's my loopy bit of thread there. So I want to come in the sole at about the position of that next stitch mark, and I want to just bury my needle once again into the sole so that my my knot that I've tied will get buried. So pull that through, nestle that knot in there, put your fabric back down, and then you want to come back over here to where this stitch is and come back up just as if you were making the stitch that you did before. Whoops, a knot there. This is why it's not so much fun having a really long piece of thread. It's because it can get knotted sometimes. So just pull that up. Right, there we go. So pull that through. So you've pulled that all the way through, and you can almost see that your stitch, you get a little horizontal stitch there, but that beds into your espadrille. So that would be a problem if you're using a contrasting colour, but because this colour matches, it's not a problem. And that way you can then just carry on sewing as per usual. And you've kind of got like almost an invisible join. And your knots are all sort of buried into the sole as well. And then when you come round to the area where you have the crossover, it is a bit tougher because you've got more layers to sew through. But just, you know, this is why I think if you've got a join to do, try and make your join in your thread, whoops, so that it is avoiding the areas where your soles cross over, but also, you know, before you get to the heel part, which is kind of trickier to get into. So if you can see that you're going to run out of thread, then, you know, replace your thread in good time at an area like this where it's easy to make that join. Okay, so we're now coming back round to where we left off. I've done my, my last stitch here as normal, and you can see that my next stitch would bring me back to my first stitch. So do that next stitch as per normal, coming back up here to join up, and pull that nice and tight. So there's your join. Then what you want to do is you want to go back in, but just through the fabric only, and you want to go back in not within this quadrant here, because then look, that will come undone. So you want to come back into this side through the fabric, because that will then continue to hold everything in place. Bit fiddly. pull that nice and tight so you can see that that's now holding that stitch there. You can then come back out just somewhere at the end of that stitch down there. Pull that nice and tight. And then make a knot just with the thread at the bottom there. Pull that really nice and tight. And then bring your thread back in through the sole along here. Give it a good tug and then just trim it off. And then all of your knot is just there. It's sort of concealed a bit, and you have a nice continual line both where your join was and where your start and finish was. You've got a nice continual look. You also want to avoid any lumps and bumps sort of within the sole there where your foot will be, so just make sure that any knots that you've made are tucked inside. Are now both sewn up all the way around. It's, you know, it is a rustic look. It's hard to get it perfect, but it has that lovely hand finished feel, and it's a bit, you know, tough sewing through some of those layers, but hopefully once you got into the rhythm you found that quite relaxing, sewing around those soles, something a bit different with a bit of hand stitching for today's tutorial. So the next thing you want to do is just to try them on, and you'll see that these bits here at the moment are loose. So what we're going to do next is we're going to hand stitch down this area here and this area here. But if you try them on first of all, because you do have a bit of give, you know, how do you sew them here? Do you sew them here? You know, what's going to be comfortable fit for your particular foot shape. So pop them on, and then if you just bring these two edges together, you can either draw a little chalk line here where you want them to meet, or you can pop a pin through very, very carefully through both layers to get the fit comfortable on you. They are going to be they are kind of quite slippy shoes by the nature of them, but you just want them to be, you know, nice and tight, or and nice and well fitting across here. So try them both on, pin or make a chalk mark for where you want those to fit, and then we're just going to hand stitch across here and here and here and here to finish the shoes off. I've fitted my shoes on and I've sewn the first one up, so I don't know if you can see those stitches, but I've just hand stitched along here and along here, and it's just like a very kind of discreet hand stitch that I've done that doesn't really show too much, you know, when you're wearing the shoe, but it just holds everything together. So I just tried them on, pinned this in place to get my fit, and then draw out some thread. Oops. And you're just going to use a normal hand stitch needle now, because we're just sewing through the cotton part, not through that heavy, the sole area of the shoe. And I kind of want to double that thread up at the end. Oops. So I'll start off just by bedding my thread, sort of hiding my thread tails somewhere in there to tie a knot. So just put my thread back in there. And then post it back through the loop to tie a knot. And then I just want to sort of sew the two layers together. So I'm using a double thickness of thread. So what I'll do is, I'm holding the placement with my thumb now so I can get rid of that pin, because I think it's going to get in the way a little bit. So I just want to post my needle down through here and up through there. And then I'll just do a little row of tiny sort of diagonal almost stitches through both layers. Just keeping them really small and as neat as you can. And once you get to the top, just finish off with one last stitch. And then you want to just knot your thread and then just bury the thread back in between your layers of fabric and trim it off. So you'll end up with something that looks like that. So I'll do the same on the other side, and that's my shoes finished. So there are your lovely espadrilles all sewn up. There's just one last thing actually that I like to do. So you can wear them as slip-ons, which is lovely, which is great. If you take two 60cm pieces of your cotton tape, you can then thread that through the loop at the back of your heel. And if you want to wear them without them kind of flip-flopping about and slipping off, then you can actually just have a little ankle tie like this, and that just keeps them on and looks really nice as well. So that's your espadrilles completely finished now and ready to wear. I'm going to be wearing mine this bank holiday weekend. They're nice and cheery and the sun's come out just at the right moment. So next up I am going to show you how to make the matching drawstring bag that you can keep them in.